Welcome back to History Bedtime Stories, where we journey through time to uncover the mysteries of our ancient past. Tonight, we're traveling to the windswept hills of southeastern Turkey, to a place that has fundamentally changed everything we thought we knew about the dawn of human civilization. This is the story of Göbekli Tepe, a monument so old, so impossibly sophisticated, that it predates Stonehenge by over 6,000 years and the Great Pyramid of Giza by nearly 7,000 years. Imagine, if you will, a time when the last ice age was ending, when vast glaciers were retreating across Europe and North America, when most of humanity lived in small bands of hunter-gatherers, following herds of wild animals and gathering what nature provided. This was a world without cities, without agriculture, without writing, or so we thought. But in the rolling hills of what is now Turkey, something extraordinary was taking place. Something that would challenge every assumption we've made about early human society. This is the story of Göbekli Tepe, the world's first temple, built by hunter-gatherers over 11,000 years ago. It's a story of mystery, of ancient wisdom, of a forgotten chapter in human history that's only now beginning to be told. So settle in, close your eyes, and let us take you back to the very dawn of civilization, to a time when humanity first reached toward the heavens and built something eternal. Our story begins not in ancient times, but on a hot autumn day in 1963. Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist with wild hair and an even wilder imagination, stood atop a dusty hill in southeastern Turkey, about 12 miles from the city of Şanlıurfa. The hill was called Göbekli Tepe in Turkish, literally belly hill or hill with a navel, because of its rounded, dome-like shape that rose from the surrounding landscape like the belly of a sleeping giant. Schmidt wasn't the first person to notice this hill. Local shepherds had been finding strange carved stones here for generations, but they assumed they were the remains of an old Byzantine cemetery. Even archaeologists had visited the site before. In 1963, American archaeologist Peter Benedict had noted the presence of worked flint and limestone fragments scattered across the surface, but he too assumed they were from a medieval Islamic cemetery and moved on to what seemed like more promising sites. But Klaus Schmidt saw something different. Where others saw scattered stones and worthless rubble, he saw the telltale signs of something far more ancient and far more significant. The limestone fragments weren't random, they were arranged in patterns. The worked flint wasn't medieval, it was clearly prehistoric. And most intriguingly, there were no pottery sherds anywhere on the surface, which suggested the site was pre-Neolithic, dating to a time before humans had learned to make ceramics. Schmidt had been working in Turkey for years, and he understood the archaeological landscape better than almost anyone. He knew that this region, ancient Mesopotamia, was where agriculture first developed, where humans first settled into permanent villages, where civilization as we know it began. But this hill, this unremarkable bump in the landscape, seemed to be telling a different story entirely. In 1994, after years of bureaucratic negotiations and fundraising, Schmidt finally received permission to begin excavating at Göbekli Tepe. He assembled a small team and began the careful, painstaking work of archaeological excavation. They started with test trenches, narrow cuts into the earth designed to give them a glimpse of what lay beneath the surface. What they found in those first few days of digging would change archaeology forever. Just a few feet below the surface, Schmidt's team uncovered massive limestone blocks, carefully shaped and precisely placed. These weren't random stones or the remains of later construction. They were clearly part of a deliberate, planned structure. But as they carefully cleaned the soil away from these stones, it became clear that they weren't looking at walls or foundations in any conventional sense. What emerged from the earth were pillars, enormous, T-shaped limestone pillars, some standing over 15 feet tall and weighing as much as 20 tons each. These pillars were arranged in perfect circles, and they were covered in intricate carvings of animals, symbols, and mysterious figures that seemed to dance across the stone surfaces. Schmidt realized immediately that he had stumbled upon something unprecedented. This wasn't just an ancient building, it was a temple complex, and it was older than anything that was supposed to exist in this part of the world. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found in association with the structures would eventually confirm what Schmidt suspected from the beginning. Göbekli Tepe was built between 11,000 and 12,000 years ago, during a period archaeologists call the Pre-Pottery Neolithic A. This date was revolutionary because it meant that Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, people who were supposed to be living in small, mobile groups, following herds of wild animals and gathering wild plants for survival. These people weren't supposed to have the social organization, the technical skills, or the surplus labor necessary to build massive stone monuments. Yet here was proof that they not only could build such monuments, but that they had built something more sophisticated and more ambitious than anything else known from that period. As Schmidt's excavations continued year after year, the true scope and sophistication of Göbekli Tepe became increasingly apparent. The site wasn't just a single building or even a single temple. It was a vast complex of multiple structures spread across about 22 acres. Ground-penetrating radar surveys would eventually reveal that only about 5% of the site has been excavated so far, meaning that dozens of additional structures likely remain buried beneath the soil. The excavated portions of Göbekli Tepe consist of several distinct areas, which archaeologists have designated as enclosures and numbered sequentially as they're discovered. Each enclosure is a roughly circular arrangement of massive T-shaped pillars, with two larger central pillars flanked by smaller ones around the perimeter. The overall effect is reminiscent of a stone forest, with these towering monoliths rising from the earth like giant sentinels keeping eternal watch. But it's the details of these structures that truly boggle the mind. The pillars weren't simply carved from stone. They were precisely engineered. Each T-shaped pillar was quarried from the limestone bedrock of the hill itself, using techniques that remain mysterious to archaeologists. The quarry sites are still visible on the hill, showing where massive blocks were carefully extracted from the living rock. But how hunter-gatherers managed to quarry, transport, and erect stones weighing up to 20 tons using only stone tools and human labor remains one of the great mysteries of Göbekli Tepe. The most famous and best preserved of the enclosures is known as Enclosure D, which has become the iconic image of Göbekli Tepe that appears in documentaries and textbooks around the world. This circular structure is about 65 feet in diameter and contains 12 pillars arranged around the perimeter, with two massive central pillars standing nearly 18 feet tall. The central pillars are particularly remarkable. They're clearly anthropomorphic, carved to represent stylized human figures. These central pillars have arms carved in relief along their sides, bent at the elbows with hands meeting at what would be the figure's belly or waist. They wear belts around their waists, and some appear to be wearing loincloths or skirts. Most remarkably, one of the pillars in Enclosure D has what appears to be a fox pelt or fur garment draped over one arm, carved with incredible detail and realism. The anthropomorphic nature of these pillars suggests that they represent gods, ancestors, or other supernatural beings. They stand like giant guardians at the center of each enclosure, their faceless heads turned toward the sky, their arms positioned in gestures that seem both protective and welcoming. Some archaeologists have suggested that these pillars represent the earliest known depictions of deities in human history, making Göbekli Tepe not just the world's oldest temple, but also the birthplace of organized religion. But the central pillars are only part of the story. The The perimeter pillars and the walls connecting them are covered in some of the most sophisticated Stone Age art ever discovered. These carvings include dozens of different animals: lions, leopards, wild boars, foxes, gazelles, aurochs, wild donkeys, snakes, scorpions, spiders, and numerous species of birds. The animals are carved in high relief with incredible skill and attention to detail, showing that the artists who created them were intimately familiar with the natural world around them. The animal carvings aren't simply decorative. They appear to tell stories or convey specific meanings that we're only beginning to understand. Some animals appear repeatedly throughout the complex, suggesting they held special significance for the builders. Lions, for example, are one of the most common motifs, often depicted in threatening poses with bared fangs and aggressive postures. Wild boars are also frequent subjects, sometimes shown in herds or being hunted by human figures. Perhaps most intriguingly, many of the pillars feature carvings of vultures, often depicted with outstretched wings and what appear to be human heads or skulls in their talons. These vulture carvings have led some archaeologists to suggest that Göbekli Tepe may have been associated with sky burial, the practice of exposing dead bodies to vultures and other scavengers as a form of funeral rite. This practice was common among many ancient cultures and continues today among some Tibetan and Zoroastrian communities. The sophistication of these carvings cannot be overstated. Created over 11,000 years ago using only stone tools, they demonstrate a level of artistic skill and planning that rivals work from much later periods. The artists who created these carvings had to understand not only the anatomy and behavior of the animals they depicted, but also the properties of limestone as a carving medium. They had to plan their compositions carefully, understanding how the relief would look when viewed from different angles and in different lighting conditions. One of the most mysterious aspects of the animal carvings is their apparent organization and symbolism. The animals aren't randomly distributed. Certain species appear in specific locations within each enclosure, suggesting a deliberate iconographic program. Lions tend to appear on the central pillars, while other animals are relegated to the perimeter stones. Some animals appear to be arranged in narrative sequences, as if telling stories or myths that were important to the culture that created them. The mystery deepens when we consider the absence of certain animals from the carved menagerie. Despite the fact that the region around Göbekli Tepe would have been rich with diverse wildlife during the early Holocene period, many species that would have been common are completely absent from the carvings. Fish, for example, are entirely missing, despite the fact that the nearby Euphrates River would have been teeming with aquatic life. Similarly, many birds that would have been abundant in the area are not represented, while others that would have been rare or seasonal visitors are prominently featured. This selective representation suggests that the animal carvings weren't simply meant to document the local fauna, but rather to convey specific religious, mythological, or symbolic meanings. The absence of certain animals may be as significant as the presence of others, indicating complex belief systems that we're only beginning to glimpse through the archaeological record. The human figures depicted at Göbekli Tepe are equally intriguing and mysterious. While the central pillars are clearly anthropomorphic, representing stylized human forms, there are also smaller human figures carved into various stones throughout the complex. These figures are often shown in association with animals, sometimes appearing to control or dominate them, other times appearing to be threatened or pursued by them. One of the most striking human figures appears on what's known as the Vulture Stone in Enclosure D. This stone shows a human figure that appears to be headless, surrounded by vultures and other predatory animals. Some archaeologists have interpreted this as a depiction of death and dismemberment, possibly related to funerary practices or mythological beliefs about the afterlife. Others see it as a shamanic figure undergoing spiritual transformation, with the headlessness representing a trance state or out-of-body experience. The human figures at Göbekli Tepe are consistently depicted without faces, which adds to their mysterious quality. Unlike the animals, which are carved with meticulous attention to facial features and expressions, the human figures are essentially faceless, with their heads represented as blank, rounded forms. This facelessness may have been intentional, perhaps representing the idea that these figures were meant to be universal or archetypal rather than specific individuals. Some of the human figures appear to be wearing elaborate headdresses or have objects protruding from their heads, suggesting specialized roles or supernatural attributes. Others are shown with exaggerated genitalia or in explicitly sexual poses, indicating that fertility and reproduction may have been important themes in the religious beliefs of Göbekli Tepe's builders. The positioning of human figures relative to animals also provides clues about the worldview of the people who created these carvings. In some cases, humans appear to be in control, shown as hunters or masters of the animal world. But in other instances, humans appear vulnerable or threatened, dwarfed by massive predators or surrounded by dangerous creatures. This duality suggests a complex relationship between humans and nature, one that recognized both human agency and human vulnerability in the face of natural forces. The construction techniques used at Göbekli Tepe represent another layer of the site's mystery. The massive T-shaped pillars were quarried from the limestone bedrock using only stone tools. Copper and bronze wouldn't be invented for several thousand more years. Yet the precision with which these stones were cut and shaped rivals work done with modern power tools. Archaeological evidence from the quarry sites shows that the builders used a technique called fire setting to help crack and split the limestone. They would build fires against the rock face, then throw cold water on the heated stone, causing it to fracture along predictable lines. They then used stone hammers and chisels to refine the shape of each pillar, smoothing the surfaces and carving the intricate details we see today. But quarrying the stones was only the first challenge. Moving them from the quarry to their final positions would have required enormous human effort and sophisticated engineering knowledge. The largest pillars weigh up to 20 tons, equivalent to about 4 adult elephants, and had to be transported across uneven terrain without the benefit of wheels, which hadn't been invented yet, or domesticated animals, which weren't available in this region during the pre-pottery Neolithic period. Experimental archaeology has provided some insights into how this might have been accomplished. Teams of researchers have demonstrated that large stones can be moved using log rollers, rope, and coordinated human effort. But even with these techniques, moving a 20-ton pillar would have required hundreds of people working in perfect coordination, along with massive amounts of rope, wood, and other materials that would have had to be gathered from distant forests. Once the pillars reached their destinations, they had to be erected, another monumental challenge. The circular enclosures show that each pillar had to be placed in a precise position and orientation, suggesting careful planning and surveying. The pillars were set into specially cut sockets in the bedrock, with smaller stones used as wedges to hold them in perfect vertical alignment. The precision of this construction is remarkable. Despite being built over 11,000 years ago, the pillars at Göbekli Tepe remain perfectly upright and aligned. The circular enclosures are geometrically precise, with the pillars spaced at regular intervals around carefully measured circumferences. This level of precision suggests not only sophisticated engineering knowledge, but also standardized units of measurement and mathematical understanding that we don't typically associate with hunter-gatherer societies. The social organization required to build Göbekli Tepe would have been equally sophisticated. Conservative estimates suggest that each enclosure would have required thousands of person-hours to complete, from quarrying and moving the stones to carving the intricate decorations. The entire complex, if it was built over a period of several centuries as archaeologists believe, would have required tens of thousands of hours of specialized labor. This presents a fundamental challenge to our understanding of hunter-gatherer societies. Traditional models suggest that such societies lived at subsistence level, with all members focused on the daily tasks of finding food and shelter. There simply wasn't supposed to be enough surplus labor or social coordination to undertake massive construction projects like Göbekli Tepe. The existence of the site forces us to reconsider these assumptions. The people who built Göbekli Tepe must have had access to abundant resources and sophisticated social institutions that allowed them to organize and sustain large-scale construction projects over long periods. They must have had specialized craftsmen, stone carvers, quarrymen, engineers, and artists who could devote their time to construction rather than subsistence activities. This suggests a level of social complexity that wasn't supposed to exist until thousands of years later, after the development of agriculture and permanent settlements. Yet here is proof that hunter-gatherers were capable of creating complex social hierarchies, organizing large-scale labor projects, and developing specialized crafts and technologies. The implications extend beyond just social organization to questions about religion, ideology, and human consciousness. Building Göbekli Tepe required not just labor and resources, but also shared beliefs and motivations powerful enough to inspire such enormous effort. The people who built this complex must have had compelling religious or ideological reasons for undertaking such a massive project. The astronomical alignments found at Göbekli Tepe provide another window into the sophisticated knowledge of its builders. Several of the enclosures appear to be oriented towards specific celestial phenomena, including the rising and setting of certain stars and constellations. Enclosure D, for example, is aligned with the summer solstice sunrise, while other structures point toward the constellation Cygnus, which would have been prominent in the night sky during the early Holocene period. These astronomical alignments suggest that the builders of Göbekli Tepe possessed detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics and were able to make precise observations of stellar and solar movements. This knowledge was then incorporated into the design and construction of the complex, creating a sacred landscape that was intimately connected to the cosmos. The importance of astronomical observation in early human societies cannot be overstated. For hunter-gatherer groups, understanding the movements of celestial bodies was crucial for navigation, timekeeping, and predicting seasonal changes that affected the availability of plants and animals. But the sophisticated astronomical alignments at Göbekli Tepe suggest something more than practical knowledge. They indicate a cosmological worldview that saw deep connections between earthly and heavenly realms. Some researchers have suggested that Göbekli Tepe may have functioned as an ancient observatory, where priest astronomers made detailed observations of the night sky and developed the mathematical and astronomical knowledge that would later become fundamental to agricultural societies. The elevated position of the site, with clear views in all directions, would have made it an ideal location for such observations. The connection between Göbekli Tepe and the development of astronomy is particularly intriguing when we consider the role that astronomical knowledge played in the later development of agriculture. Farming requires precise timing, knowing when to plant, when to harvest, when to expect rains or dry seasons. This knowledge comes from careful observation of celestial cycles, particularly the movement of the sun and stars throughout the year. It's possible that the astronomical observations made at Göbekli Tepe contributed to the development of agricultural knowledge in the surrounding region. The Fertile Crescent, which includes the area around Göbekli Tepe, was where agriculture first developed sometime between 10,000 and 8,000 years ago. The proximity of Göbekli Tepe to the earliest agricultural sites may not be coincidental. The astronomical knowledge developed at the temple complex may have been crucial for the transition from hunting and gathering to farming. The religious and ritual aspects of Göbekli Tepe remain largely mysterious, but archaeological evidence provides some tantalizing clues. The site appears to have been used for large gatherings, possibly including feasts, ceremonies, and other ritual activities. Excavations have uncovered large quantities of animal bones, particularly from wild game animals like gazelles and aurochs, suggesting that communal feasting was an important activity at the site. The animal bones show evidence of careful butchering and consumption, indicating organized food preparation and distribution. Some of the bones show cut marks consistent with defleshing, while others appear to have been cracked open to extract marrow. The quantity and variety of animal remains suggest that these weren't ordinary meals, but special occasions that brought together large groups of people from across the region. The stone basins and containers found throughout the complex may have been used for storing or serving food and drink during these gatherings. Some of these vessels are quite large, capable of holding dozens of gallons of liquid, suggesting that they were intended for communal use rather than individual consumption. Archaeological evidence also suggests that some form of sacrifice or offering may have taken place at Göbekli Tepe. Several of the stone containers show traces of organic compounds that may be the remains of plant or animal offerings. Some researchers have suggested that psychoactive substances may have been used in rituals at the site, though this remains speculative. The discovery of human skull fragments in some areas of the complex has led to speculation about possible human sacrifice or skull cult practices. However, the evidence is limited, and it's equally possible that these remains are related to secondary burial practices or ancestor veneration rather than sacrifice. One of the most intriguing aspects of Göbekli Tepe is its apparent abandonment and deliberate burial around 8,000 years ago. Rather than simply walking away from the site, the people who used it went to enormous effort to bury the entire complex under tons of earth and stone. This wasn't gradual abandonment or natural burial by wind and weather. It was a deliberate, organized effort that would have required nearly as much labor as the original construction. The reasons for this deliberate burial remain one of the greatest mysteries of Göbekli Tepe. Some archaeologists have suggested that it was related to changing religious beliefs or social upheaval. Others propose that it may have been connected to the development of agriculture and the transition to settled village life, which fundamentally changed the social and economic systems of the region. It's also possible that the burial was related to environmental changes. The early Holocene period was a time of dramatic climate change, as the last ice age ended and global temperatures rose. These changes would have affected the distribution of plants and animals, potentially making the old hunter-gatherer lifestyle unsustainable in some areas. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe may have been a way of preserving the site for future generations, or it may have been seen as necessary to prevent the desecration of a sacred place by people with different beliefs or practices. In either case, the decision to bury the complex demonstrates the same kind of sophisticated social organization and shared purpose that was required to build it in the first place. The preservation of Göbekli Tepe by burial has been a blessing for modern archaeologists. The earth and stone that covered the complex for nearly 10,000 years protected the delicate carvings and structures from weathering, vandalism, and destruction. When Klaus Schmidt and his team began excavations in the 1990s, they found the pillars and carvings in remarkable condition, almost as if they had been placed under the earth yesterday rather than millennia ago. But the excellent preservation also presents challenges for archaeological interpretation. Unlike sites that have been continuously occupied or gradually abandoned, Göbekli Tepe offers a snapshot of a single moment in time, or rather several moments, since the complex appears to have been built and rebuilt over several centuries. This makes it difficult to understand how the site evolved over time or how its use changed as the culture that built it developed and changed. The relationship between Göbekli Tepe and the development of agriculture remains one of the most fascinating aspects of the site's story. As mentioned earlier, the Fertile Crescent region where Göbekli Tepe is located was where agriculture first developed, sometime between 10,000 and 8,000 years ago. This means that the construction and use of Göbekli Tepe overlapped with humanity's first experiments in plant and animal domestication. Traditional archaeological theory suggests that agriculture developed first, creating the surplus resources and settled lifestyle necessary for building monumental architecture. But Göbekli Tepe challenges this assumption, demonstrating that hunter-gatherers were capable of creating complex monuments before the development of farming. Some researchers have even suggested that the relationship might be reversed, that the need to support the large gatherings and construction projects at Göbekli Tepe may have driven the development of agriculture. If hundreds or thousands of people were gathering regularly at the site, the local wild resources would quickly have been exhausted. This might have created pressure to develop more intensive methods of food production, leading to the first experiments with plant cultivation and animal domestication. This theory, known as the Temple First hypothesis, suggests that religion and ritual were the primary drivers of social complexity in early human societies, rather than economic or environmental factors. According to this view, the desire to create sacred spaces and perform religious ceremonies motivated the development of the social institutions, technologies, and economic systems that we associate with civilized society. The evidence from Göbekli Tepe certainly supports this hypothesis. The site demonstrates that hunter-gatherer societies were capable of much greater social complexity and technological sophistication than previously thought, but only when motivated by religious or ideological imperatives. The enormous effort invested in building and maintaining the complex suggests that spiritual concerns were at least as important as practical ones for the people who created it. The influence of Göbekli Tepe on later cultures in the region is another area of active research and debate. The site was abandoned and buried around 8,000 years ago, but this doesn't mean that its influence disappeared. Many of the artistic motifs, architectural techniques, and possibly even religious beliefs associated with Göbekli Tepe appear to have continued in later cultures throughout Mesopotamia and Anatolia. The T-shaped pillar design, for example, appears in later Neolithic sites throughout the region, though never again at the massive scale seen at Göbekli Tepe. The animal symbolism found in the carvings, particularly the emphasis on lions, bulls, and birds of prey, became common throughout ancient Near Eastern art and continues to appear in the mythologies and religious traditions of the region today. The astronomical knowledge demonstrated at Göbekli Tepe may also have been passed down to later cultures. The sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics evident in the site's alignments became fundamental to later Mesopotamian astronomy and astrology, which in turn influenced Greek science and philosophy. Even more speculatively, some researchers have suggested that the religious and mythological traditions associated with Göbekli Tepe may have influenced the development of later religions, including elements that eventually made their way into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. While this remains highly speculative, the proximity of Göbekli Tepe to locations mentioned in biblical texts, combined with the site's apparent focus on themes of death, rebirth, and human relationship with the divine, makes such connections intriguing to consider. The conservation and management of Göbekli Tepe present ongoing challenges for archaeologists and cultural heritage professionals. The site's inscription on UNESCO's World Heritage List in 2018 brought international attention and protection, but also increased pressures from tourism and development. Balancing the need for continued archaeological research with the imperative to preserve the site for future generations requires careful planning and substantial resources. Climate change poses particular threats to Göbekli Tepe's preservation. The limestone pillars and carvings that survived burial for nearly 10,000 years are now exposed to weathering, temperature fluctuations, and other environmental stresses. Rain, wind, and temperature changes cause gradual erosion of the stone surfaces, threatening the intricate carvings that make the site so remarkable. Modern conservation efforts include the construction of protective shelters over the excavated enclosures, climate monitoring systems, and careful documentation of all carved surfaces using advanced 3D scanning techniques. These efforts ensure that even if some deterioration is inevitable, detailed records of the site's current condition will be preserved for future researchers. The limited extent of excavation at Göbekli Tepe, only about 5% of the total site has been uncovered, presents both opportunities and challenges for future research. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive survey techniques have revealed the presence of many more structures buried beneath the surface, suggesting that decades of additional excavation would be needed to fully understand the site's extent and complexity. However, the decision of how much to excavate is complicated by conservation concerns. Each enclosure that is uncovered becomes vulnerable to weathering and requires ongoing maintenance and protection. The Turkish archaeological authorities have therefore adopted a cautious approach, focusing on thoroughly studying and documenting the already excavated areas before exposing new structures to the elements. The international research collaboration at Göbekli Tepe represents one of the most intensive and interdisciplinary archaeological projects ever undertaken. Teams of archaeologists, art historians, geologists, botanists, zoologists, astronomers, and other specialists from around the world contribute to ongoing research at the site. This collaborative approach is essential given the complexity and interdisciplinary nature of the questions that Göbekli Tepe raises about early human society, religion, and technology. Recent advances in archaeological science have opened new avenues for research at the site. Environmental DNA analysis of soil samples can reveal information about the plants and animals that were present when the site was in use, providing insights into ancient ecology and climate. Isotope analysis of human and animal remains can show where individuals came from and what they ate, revealing patterns of mobility and subsistence that help us understand how the site functioned in its regional context. Advanced dating techniques continue to refine our understanding of when different parts of the complex were built and used. While radiocarbon dating provides the basic chronological framework, newer techniques like optically stimulated luminescence dating of the stones themselves may eventually allow archaeologists to determine exactly when each pillar was carved and erected. The study of ancient DNA from human remains at the site may eventually reveal information about the genetic ancestry and population relationships of Göbekli Tepe's builders. This could help answer questions about whether the site was built by local populations or whether people from distant regions were involved in its construction and use. Göbekli Tepe has also become a testing ground for new archaeological technologies and methods. The site was one of the first major archaeological projects to use widespread 3D documentation, creating detailed digital models of every pillar and carving. These models not only serve conservation purposes, but also allow researchers around the world to study the site virtually and make new discoveries without physically visiting Turkey. Virtual and augmented reality technologies are being developed to help both researchers and the public experience and understand Göbekli Tepe. These technologies can show how the site might have appeared when it was in use, complete with roofing structures that have long since disappeared and lighting conditions that might have been created by torches or fires. The impact of Göbekli Tepe on our understanding of early human society extends far beyond archaeology and into broader questions about the nature of civilization, religion, and human consciousness. The site challenges fundamental assumptions about the relationship between technology, social organization, and cultural development that have guided archaeological and anthropological thinking for generations. The traditional model of human cultural evolution suggests a linear progression from simple to complex, from nomadic to settled, from egalitarian to hierarchical. In this model, monumental architecture was supposed to appear only after agriculture had created surplus resources and permanent settlements had created stable social hierarchies. But Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that this linear progression doesn't always hold true, and that early human societies were capable of remarkable complexity and achievement even within supposedly primitive social and economic systems. The site also challenges assumptions about the relationship between technology and social development. The sophisticated engineering and artistic techniques demonstrated at Göbekli Tepe show that technological capability isn't simply a function of available tools or materials, but depends equally on knowledge, skill, social organization, and motivation. The builders of Göbekli Tepe achieved remarkable results using only stone tools because they possessed sophisticated knowledge and were motivated by powerful beliefs that justified enormous effort and sacrifice. Perhaps most significantly, Göbekli Tepe provides evidence for the crucial role of religion and ideology in early human social development. The site demonstrates that spiritual and symbolic concerns were not luxuries that appeared only after basic survival needs were met, but were fundamental drivers of human behavior and social organization from the very beginning of complex society. The willingness of hunter-gatherer groups to invest enormous resources in building and maintaining Göbekli Tepe shows that religious beliefs and practices were powerful enough to motivate unprecedented levels of social cooperation and technological innovation. This suggests that religion and spirituality weren't add-ons to human culture that appeared after more practical concerns were satisfied, but were central organizing principles that helped make complex culture possible in the first place. The mystery of Göbekli Tepe's builders remains one of the most compelling aspects of the site's story. Who were these people who created the world's first temple? What beliefs motivated them to undertake such an enormous project? How did they organize themselves socially and economically to sustain construction over multiple generations? Archaeological evidence suggests that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were members of multiple hunter-gatherer groups who came together periodically to work on the site. The variety of stone tool traditions found at the site indicates that people from different cultural backgrounds participated in its construction. The abundance of animal bones from species that would have migrated seasonally suggests that construction activities were timed to coincide with periods when large numbers of animals and the people who hunted them were present in the area. This pattern suggests that Göbekli Tepe served as a gathering place for dispersed hunter-gatherer groups, bringing together communities that might otherwise have had little contact with each other. The shared effort of building and maintaining the complex would have created social bonds and cultural connections that extended across vast geographic areas. The specialized knowledge required to design and build Göbekli Tepe suggests the existence of craft specialists, individuals who devoted significant time to developing expertise in stone carving, engineering, astronomy, or other technical fields. These specialists may have traveled between different communities, sharing their knowledge and skills, or they may have been supported by particular groups as full-time religious or technical practitioners. The existence of such specialists challenges traditional models of hunter-gatherer society, which typically assume that all members of the group participate equally in subsistence activities. The specialized craftsmen who created Göbekli Tepe must have been supported by the labor of others, suggesting more complex economic and social relationships than are usually associated with hunter-gatherer societies. The religious beliefs and practices associated with Göbekli Tepe remain largely mysterious, but the archaeological evidence provides some intriguing clues. The emphasis on animals in the carved imagery suggests that relationships between humans and animals were central to the belief system of the builders. The prominent role of predators like lions and leopards may indicate beliefs about dangerous supernatural forces that needed to be appeased or controlled. The vulture imagery found throughout the complex has led some researchers to suggest connections to death and rebirth symbolism. Vultures play important roles in many traditional religions as psychopomps, creatures that guide souls between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The prominence of vulture symbolism at Göbekli Tepe may indicate that the site was associated with funeral rites, ancestor veneration, or beliefs about the afterlife. The astronomical alignments at the site suggest that celestial observations and astrology may have been important elements of the religious practices conducted there. The builders clearly possessed sophisticated knowledge of stellar movements and incorporated this knowledge into the design of their sacred structures. This suggests a cosmological worldview that saw important connections between earthly events and celestial phenomena. The apparently deliberate burial of the site around 8,000 years ago may provide the biggest clue to the religious beliefs of its builders. The enormous effort required to bury the entire complex suggests that this wasn't simply abandonment, but rather a sacred act with deep spiritual significance. Some researchers have suggested that the burial may have been seen as necessary to preserve the sanctity of the site, preventing its desecration by people with different beliefs or practices. Alternatively, the burial may have been related to eschatological beliefs, ideas about the end of the world or the end of an age. Many traditional religions include concepts of cyclical time, where different ages or worlds come to an end and are replaced by new ones. The burial of Göbekli Tepe may have marked the end of one such age and the transition to a new era, symbolically represented by the development of agriculture and settled village life. The legacy of Göbekli Tepe extends far beyond its immediate historical context to influence our contemporary understanding of human history and potential. The site has become a powerful symbol of the hidden depths of human achievement and the possibility that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we previously imagined. The discovery has sparked renewed interest in other megalithic sites around the world, leading to re-examination of monuments that were previously thought to be much younger. Sites like Navali Kori in Turkey, Karahan Tepe, also in Turkey, and even more distant monuments like those at Poverty Point in Louisiana are being reconsidered in light of what Göbekli Tepe has revealed about early human capabilities. The site has also influenced popular culture and public imagination, appearing in numerous documentaries, books, and even science fiction stories. While some of these popular treatments venture into speculative territory that goes well beyond the archaeological evidence, they reflect the genuine sense of wonder and mystery that Göbekli Tepe evokes. The ongoing research at Göbekli Tepe continues to yield new discoveries and insights. Recent excavations have uncovered additional enclosures with their own unique characteristics and artistic programs. Each new discovery adds pieces to the puzzle of understanding this remarkable site and the people who created it. One of the most significant recent discoveries has been evidence for sophisticated water management systems at the site. Channels and cisterns carved into the bedrock suggest that the builders had developed methods for collecting and storing rainwater, possibly for use in rituals or for supporting the large gatherings that took place there. This discovery adds another layer to our understanding of the technological sophistication of Göbekli Tepe's builders. New dating techniques continue to refine our understanding of the site's chronology. While the major construction phase is well established at around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, evidence suggests that the site may have been in use for much longer. Some structures may date back as much as 14,000 years, pushing the origins of monumental architecture even further back in time. Advanced analysis of the stone tools found at the site has revealed sophisticated understanding of lithic technology among the builders. The tools show evidence of specialized production techniques and standardized forms that suggest organized workshops and possibly even trade networks for high-quality stone materials. The study of ancient DNA from human remains at Göbekli Tepe and surrounding sites is beginning to reveal information about the population genetics of the region during the early Holocene period. Preliminary results suggest complex patterns of migration and population mixing that may help explain how the knowledge and labor needed to build Göbekli Tepe were assembled. Environmental reconstruction of the landscape around Göbekli Tepe during its period of use reveals a very different world from today. The region was much more forested and well-watered, supporting diverse communities of large mammals that no longer exist in the area. This rich environment would have been able to support much larger human populations than the current arid landscape, helping to explain how enough people could have been sustained to undertake such massive construction projects. Climate modeling suggests that the end of Göbekli Tepe's use period coincided with a significant environmental shift toward drier conditions. This climate change may have contributed to the site's abandonment, as the local environment could no longer support the large gatherings that were apparently central to its function. The agricultural transition that was taking place in the region during Göbekli Tepe's later phases may also have contributed to changing social and religious patterns that made the site obsolete. As people settled into permanent villages and developed new economic systems based on farming and animal domestication, the old patterns of seasonal gathering and monument building may have become irrelevant or even counterproductive. The social implications of Göbekli Tepe's existence continue to be debated among archaeologists and anthropologists. Some researchers argue that the site represents evidence for early state formation, suggesting that the social organization required to build and maintain the complex was essentially governmental in nature. Others maintain that the site could have been built and operated by essentially egalitarian societies that came together periodically for shared religious purposes without developing permanent hierarchical institutions. The truth probably lies somewhere between these extremes. The builders of Göbekli Tepe clearly possessed sophisticated social institutions and were capable of organizing complex projects involving hundreds or thousands of people over extended periods. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that they had developed the kind of permanent, hierarchical state institutions that characterized later civilizations. Instead, Göbekli Tepe may represent an alternative form of social complexity, one based on religious authority, specialized knowledge, and periodic cooperation rather than permanent political control. This form of organization may have been well suited to the mobile lifestyle of hunter-gatherer societies while still allowing for ambitious collective projects. The economic implications of Göbekli Tepe are equally significant. The site demonstrates that hunter-gatherer societies were capable of generating substantial economic surpluses and organizing complex systems of production and distribution. The resources required to build and maintain the complex, including not just labor, but also materials, tools, and food for workers, would have required sophisticated economic planning and management. This economic sophistication challenges traditional assumptions about hunter-gatherer societies as living at subsistence level with no significant accumulation of wealth or resources. The builders of Göbekli Tepe clearly possessed wealth in the form of labor, knowledge, and materials, and were able to invest this wealth in long-term projects that provided no immediate practical benefits. The site also demonstrates early forms of economic specialization, with different groups apparently contributing different types of labor and expertise to the overall project. Some groups may have specialized in quarrying and moving stones, others in carving and artistic work, still others in providing food and other supplies for workers. This economic specialization would have required systems of exchange and reciprocity that went well beyond simple sharing within small kinship groups. The builders of Göbekli Tepe had to develop methods for coordinating economic activity across multiple communities and ensuring that all participants received appropriate compensation for their contributions. The technological implications of Göbekli Tepe extend beyond the immediate techniques used in its construction to broader questions about the relationship between technology and social development. The site demonstrates that technological innovation often depends more on social organization and motivation than on available materials or tools. The builders of Göbekli Tepe achieved remarkable technological results using only stone tools because they possessed sophisticated knowledge and were highly motivated to overcome technical challenges. This suggests that technological progress isn't simply a matter of accumulating better tools and materials, but depends equally on developing the social institutions and cultural values that support innovation and complex projects. The site also demonstrates the importance of knowledge transmission and cultural continuity in technological development. The sophisticated techniques evident at Göbekli Tepe didn't appear overnight, but must have been developed over long periods through experimentation and refinement. This required social institutions capable of preserving and transmitting technical knowledge across generations. The artistic achievements at Göbekli Tepe provide insights into early human consciousness and cognitive development. The sophisticated symbolic representations found in the carvings demonstrate complex abstract thinking and the ability to manipulate symbols and meanings in sophisticated ways. The animals depicted in the carvings aren't simply naturalistic representations, but clearly carry symbolic and mythological meanings. The artists who created these images had to be able to think abstractly about the relationships between different animals, their symbolic properties, and their roles in complex narrational or cosmological systems. The consistency of artistic styles and symbolic systems across the entire complex suggests shared cultural knowledge and probably formalized systems of artistic training and knowledge transmission. The quality and sophistication of the carving work indicates that at least some of the artists were full-time specialists who had devoted years to developing their craft. The artistic program at Göbekli Tepe also demonstrates early forms of visual literacy, the ability to encode and decode complex information through visual symbols. The apparent narrative sequences and symbolic relationships between different images suggest that the builders possessed sophisticated systems of visual communication that could convey complex ideas and stories without written language. The spiritual and philosophical implications of Göbekli Tepe may be the most profound of all. The site provides evidence that spiritual and religious concerns were central to human culture from the very beginning of complex society. The enormous investment in building and maintaining the complex demonstrates that spiritual needs weren't luxuries that appeared only after material needs were satisfied, but were fundamental drivers of human behavior and social development. The sophisticated astronomical alignments and symbolic programs at the site suggest that the builders possessed complex cosmological worldviews that attempted to understand humanity's place in the universe. These worldviews weren't simple or primitive, but involved sophisticated thinking about time, space, death, rebirth, and the relationship between earthly and celestial realms. The apparent emphasis on themes of death and transformation in the site's imagery suggests early forms of philosophical thinking about fundamental questions of human existence. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were clearly grappling with questions about mortality, meaning, and transcendence that continue to occupy human thought today. The international significance of Göbekli Tepe extends beyond its historical importance to contemporary questions about cultural heritage, international cooperation, and humanity's shared past. The site has become a symbol of the common heritage of all humanity, demonstrating that remarkable achievements in art, architecture, and spiritual development occurred long before the emergence of the civilizations that we typically think of as the foundations of human culture. The collaborative international research effort at Göbekli Tepe demonstrates the potential for archaeology to bring together scholars and institutions from around the world in pursuit of shared understanding. The site has become a model for international cooperation in cultural heritage research and preservation. The challenges of preserving and interpreting Göbekli Tepe also highlight broader questions about how humanity should approach its ancient heritage. The site's fragility and the limited resources available for its preservation force difficult decisions about how much to excavate, how to balance research goals with conservation needs, and how to make the site accessible to the public while protecting it from damage. These challenges are representative of those facing ancient sites around the world as population growth, climate change, and political instability threaten humanity's archaeological heritage. The solutions developed at Göbekli Tepe may provide models for addressing similar challenges elsewhere. The educational potential of Göbekli Tepe is enormous. The site provides a powerful tool for teaching about early human history, archaeological methods, cultural heritage preservation, and the importance of international cooperation. The mystery and wonder that the site evokes can inspire interest in archaeology, history, and science among students and the general public. The site story also provides valuable lessons about the dangers of making assumptions about the past based on limited evidence. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe forced archaeologists to reconsider fundamental theories about early human society and demonstrates the importance of remaining open to new evidence and new interpretations. As we look toward the future, Göbekli Tepe will continue to provide insights into humanity's ancient past, while also serving as a symbol of human potential and achievement. The site reminds us that our ancestors were capable of remarkable creativity, sophisticated thinking, and inspiring achievements even in the earliest stages of human cultural development. The ongoing research at Göbekli Tepe will undoubtedly continue to yield new discoveries and insights for generations to come. With only 5% of the site excavated so far, there are certainly many more surprises waiting beneath the soil of this remarkable hill. But perhaps more importantly, Göbekli Tepe will continue to inspire wonder and curiosity about our shared human heritage. The site stands as testimony to the remarkable achievements possible when human beings come together in pursuit of shared goals and transcendent purposes. In closing our journey to Göbekli Tepe, we're left with more questions than answers, but perhaps that's as it should be. The greatest archaeological discoveries don't just provide information about the past. They open new avenues for thinking about human potential, creativity, and meaning. Göbekli Tepe does exactly that, challenging us to reconsider our assumptions about the past while inspiring us to think more ambitiously about what human beings can achieve when motivated by powerful beliefs and shared purposes. The temple on the hill stands silent now, its builders long vanished, their beliefs and practices lost to time. But their achievement remains, carved in stone and preserved beneath the earth, waiting to tell its story to each new generation of visitors and researchers. In its weathered pillars and mysterious carvings, we can see reflections of our own deepest aspirations, the desire to create something lasting, something meaningful, something that connects us to forces greater than ourselves. Göbekli Tepe reminds us that the human quest for meaning and transcendence is as old as humanity itself. Long before cities or writing or agriculture, Our ancestors were already reaching toward the heavens, already asking the fundamental questions about existence and purpose that continue to drive human culture today. In that sense, the builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't so different from us. They were people trying to understand their place in the universe and leave something permanent behind for future generations to wonder at and learn from. And in that, they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. If you enjoyed this journey to Göbekli Tepe, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to History Bedtime Stories for more ancient mysteries. In the comments below, let us know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is. Thank you for joining us on this journey to Göbekli Tepe, the world's first temple, built by hunter-gatherers over 11,000 years ago in the hills of ancient Anatolia. Until next time, this has been History Bedtime Stories, reminding you that the past is never really past. It lives on in the stones and stories that connect us across the millennia to our shared human heritage.